Ever get that feeling like you're stuck on a treadmill, always chasing happiness, but never quite getting there?
Yeah, like there's some kind of secret to a fulfilling life that everyone else knows.
Right, like we're missing something. Well, today's deep dive might just have the answer. We're going to explore Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now.
The power of now. Classic.
Welcome to Beyond the Pages podcast, because the right book can change everything.
This book really dives into a powerful idea. The idea that real peace and joy, they're not somewhere out there in the future. They're available right here, right now.
That's a big claim. So how does Tolle explain this whole power of now thing?
He starts off by talking about what he sees as like a fundamental problem for most of us. We're so caught up in our thoughts that we actually think they're who we are.
Hmm.
You might be surprised to hear this, but Tolle actually thinks that all that mental chatter is actually what stops us from experiencing real joy.
So it's not about, completely silencing our minds? That seems pretty impossible.
It's more about recognizing that we are not our thoughts. We're more like the awareness that's observing them.
Okay.
Think of it like the sky and the clouds.
Right.
The sky is always there, vast and unchanging, even though the clouds come and go. So our true selves are like that sky. Our thoughts are just the clouds.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get that. But how does, getting lost in our thoughts actually stop us from experiencing real joy? What's the connection there?
Tolle calls all that mental chatter the ego. It's that voice in your head that's constantly comparing, judging, worrying, and always wanting more.
Right.
It creates a sense of something's missing, even when you have everything you need.
Yeah, I definitely know that feeling. Never enough, always wanting more, even when things are good.
That's the ego working, keeping you trapped in the cycle of looking for happiness outside yourself. We're always chasing after the next thing, a new car, a better job, a different relationship, thinking that will finally bring us lasting peace.
Yeah, it's like we're always looking ahead to the next thing instead of appreciating what's right in front of us. But how do we break free from that? What's the alternative?
Well, Tolle's solution is pretty simple, actually. Shift your attention to the present moment. He says, the present moment is all we ever really have. The past is gone. The future is uncertain. But this moment, right now, that's where life is actually happening.
Doesn't he have a quote about that? Something about a narrow gate that leads to life?
That's the one. Tolle writes, find the narrow gate that leads to life. It is called the now. Narrow your life down to this moment. It's like an invitation to bring our awareness to the here and now, instead of letting our minds drag us into the past or the future.
This really speaks to me. I catch myself reliving old conversations or stressing about deadlines all the time. It's exhausting. It definitely doesn't feel very joyful.
That's the ego, keeping you from experiencing the fullness of right now. What if, instead of dwelling on what already happened or worrying about what might be, you just fully immersed yourself in the sensations of this very moment?
Okay. But how do we actually do that? Shift our focus, I mean. Are we supposed to, just stop thinking altogether?
It's not about stopping thinking. It's more about becoming the observer of your thoughts. Tolle gives us different practices to help us cultivate this presence, like focusing on your breath, tuning into your senses, and just becoming aware of the space around you.
Sounds like meditation would be a good tool for that.
Definitely. Meditation can be a really powerful way to practice bringing your attention to the present. But Tolle says that cultivating presence isn't limited to meditation. You can bring that awareness into everything you do, washing dishes, walking the dog, even talking to your family.
So it's not about adding something else to our to-do list. It's about changing our perspective on the things we already do.
Exactly. Tolle says that life unfolds in the ordinary, everyday moments. And it's in those moments when we're fully present that we can experience the real richness of life.
And he calls this state the joy of being, right? A sense of peace that goes beyond the ups and downs of life. But is that really possible, to feel joy no matter what's going on?
Tolle certainly thinks so. And he tells a really powerful story to illustrate this point. He talks about a time when he experienced intense joy for 2 years straight, even though he was living without a home or a job.
Wow, that's incredible. So real joy doesn't depend on material possessions or social status. It comes from somewhere deeper.
Exactly. It's about accessing a place of peace and contentment that's always there, no matter what's happening around you.
So practically speaking, how do we start to cultivate this presence, this connection to the now?
One technique that Tolle suggests is becoming aware of the space around you. Not just the physical space, but the empty space that makes it possible for things to exist.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm following you. Can you give me an example?
Sure. Imagine you're looking at a chair. You see its shape, its color, its texture. But what about the space that surrounds the chair? The emptiness that allows the chair to be there. It's subtle, but it's always present.
Interesting. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
But how does that connect to finding inner peace?
It's a way to shift your attention from thinking to a deeper level of awareness. It's not about emptying your mind. It's more about becoming the observer of your thoughts and recognizing the space of awareness that holds those thoughts.
And that space is where we find the joy of being.
Yeah. Tolle suggests that by connecting to that inner space, to that awareness that's always present, we can tap into a deeper part of ourselves, a part that's not affected by all the ups and downs of the mind.
It makes you wonder, could you, listening right now, create even a 5-minute gap in your mental chatter today? What would it feel like to experience that inner silence?
That's a great question, and it really highlights the power of shifting our attention to the present moment.
It seems like Tolle's ideas could really impact not just our own well-being, but our relationships with others too.
Absolutely. He really emphasizes that presence is crucial for building genuine connections.
And that brings us to another fascinating point he makes about relationships. He says that real intimacy can only happen when we're fully present with each other, free from judgment and the need to control.
Yeah, he's really challenging us to show up in our relationships with genuine curiosity and acceptance, instead of just projecting our own expectations or insecurities onto the other person.
They can be tough, especially when we're so used to reacting unconsciously in our relationships.
It is a challenge, but Tolle believes that by cultivating presence and letting go of that ego's need to control, we can create space for a deeper connection and understanding.
He even uses the word surrender to describe this process. But surrender feels passive. How can that be empowering in a relationship?
That's a great question. Tolle's very clear that surrender is not about giving up or being a doormat. It's about accessing a higher power that can transform both ourselves and our relationships.
So it's more about letting go of the ego's illusion of control and letting something deeper, something wiser, guide us.
Exactly. It's about letting go of the need to be right, the need to win every argument, to have things your way. It's about creating space for real communication and allowing the relationship to just unfold organically.
I love that. It's a total shift in perspective. It's not about being right or wrong. It's about creating a space for a deeper connection.
Think about it. Have you ever found yourself arguing with your partner, just replaying the same old patterns? Tolle would say that's a sign you're both stuck in the ego, vying for control.
So instead of trying to force a certain outcome, we can choose to surrender to the present moment and just let the interaction unfold naturally.
Exactly. And that surrender can lead to a huge shift in the dynamic of the relationship.
It's like moving from a place of fear and separation to a place of love and connection.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It really speaks to the transformative power of presence, not just in our own lives, but in our relationships with others as well.
Makes you wonder, if we become more present in our own lives, could we create a ripple effect of peace and understanding in the world around us?
That's a powerful thought. And it leads us to another one of Tolle's key concepts, the idea of seeing the world as Leela, a divine play of form.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. What does that even mean?
Tolle's inviting us to shift how we see reality. Instead of taking everything so seriously, what if we saw life as a grand play, a cosmic dance?
So instead of getting caught up in all the drama of daily life, we can look at it with a sense of lightness and humor.
Precisely. It doesn't mean our actions don't matter, but it does change our perspective. It frees us from attachment and fear. He even compares our perception of reality to a dream, saying that there could be countless other interpretations possible.
He even asks if there could be a whole ant world or dolphin world going on, operating on a totally different frequency from us.
It's one of the most thought-provoking questions he asks. It challenges us to consider that maybe there's more to life than we see on the surface.
It's like he's saying, what if the world is way more magical and mysterious than we realize?
And what if that magic is available to us right here, right now?
That's a beautiful thought. But let's be real. Life isn't always sunshine and roses. What about suffering? How does Tolle deal with the reality of pain and hardship?
That's a great question, and it brings us to another important theme in the power of now. While Tolle acknowledges that suffering exists, he sees it as a potential doorway to awakening.
That sounds counterintuitive. How can suffering lead to awakening?
He's not saying we should go looking for suffering, but he suggests that By fully facing our pain without resisting it, we can access a deeper level of awareness and maybe even transform it into peace.
So it's about changing our relationship to suffering rather than trying to avoid it completely.
Exactly. It's about finding that space of awareness within the pain, instead of identifying with it as a victim.
Hmm. It makes you wonder, can we reframe our challenges as opportunities to grow and transform, even when they feel unbearable?
It's challenging, but it can be incredibly liberating. And it leads us to another profound concept that Tolle explores: conscious death.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. What does Tolle mean by conscious death?
He describes death as like an involuntary portal into the unmanifested, a place beyond form and duality. He says this portal opens up briefly at the time of physical death, and it offers a final opportunity for spiritual realization.
He even talks about people who've had near-death experiences. They describe this portal as a radiant light, a feeling of total peace and serenity.
Exactly. These stories, while they are subjective, offer a really intriguing glimpse into what might lie beyond the physical realm. Tolle suggests that if we've cultivated a connection to the unmanifested during our lives, we're more likely to recognize that portal and move through it consciously.
So it's not about fearing death, but about preparing for it by deepening our connection to our true nature, to that which transcends form and time.
Exactly. What if preparing for death wasn't about fear and anxiety, but about deepening our connection to the present moment? Imagine approaching the end of life not with dread, but with a sense of curiosity and peace.
That's a radical shift in perspective. And it seems to tie in with another theme we've touched on, surrender.
Yes. Tolle emphasizes that surrender is not about giving up or resigning yourself to a fate you don't like. It's about aligning yourself with the flow of life, accepting what is, and letting a higher intelligence guide you.
So instead of resisting or fighting against the current, we can choose to flow with it.
Exactly. He even says that surrender is the most important thing we can do to create positive change. It's about recognizing that our ego's attempts to control often create more resistance and suffering.
That makes sense. But it can be really hard to let go, especially when things are tough. How can we cultivate that surrender when it feels counterintuitive?
Well, Tolle suggests that what he calls limit situations, those moments of crisis or breakdown, can actually be powerful opportunities for awakening.
So he's saying that when our usual coping mechanisms fail, we're forced to face the present moment with complete acceptance.
He uses the example of murderers on death row. He says that in the last few hours of their lives, they experience such intense suffering that they're forced into complete surrender. And in that surrender, they find a profound sense of peace, even joy.
That's an extreme example, but it really highlights the transformative power of letting go of resistance, even in the face of the unimaginable.
Tolle reminds us that within every challenge, even in moments that feel like a complete breakdown, there's a possibility for a breakthrough. It's about shifting our perspective and recognizing that even in the midst of suffering, there's a space of awareness that's untouched by pain.
And that space is our true nature, our connection to being.
And it's always available to us no matter what's happening in our lives. Tolle reminds us that we always have the power to choose.
We can choose to react unconsciously, which just perpetuates the cycle of suffering. Or we can choose to surrender, access the power of now, and transform our experience from the inside out.
It's a radical invitation to live a life of presence, awareness, and joy. And he doesn't just leave us with these concepts. He also offers practical guidance on how to actually apply them to our everyday lives.
I'm curious to hear more about that. What are some of the specific practices or insights Tolle offers to help us cultivate this power of now?
One thing that really struck me about the power of now is how Tolle kind of redefines work.
Oh yeah, he doesn't see it as just like a means to an end, right?
No, not at all. He actually believes that as more and more people wake up to this power of now, the whole idea of work as we know it could disappear.
Wow, that's a big prediction. But what would that even look like? Would we all just stop working?
Not about being idle, it's more about changing why we do things. Like, imagine people choosing to use their talents and skills just because it brings them joy, because it aligns with, their purpose.
So instead of feeling obligated or like burdened by work, we'd approach it with enthusiasm and fulfillment.
Exactly. It's about aligning what you do with what you love, letting work become an expression of who you really are, not something you gotta endure.
I like that. It makes you think about how many people are stuck in jobs that just drain them, that stifle their creativity.
And all that wasted potential in the world because people feel so disconnected from their work. Tolle says that by bringing presence and awareness into our work, we can actually transform it into something joyful and creative.
This whole idea of bringing presence into everything we do, including work, really makes Tolle's teachings relatable to everyone, not just, people on a spiritual path.
Absolutely. And speaking of presence, Tolle also challenges another common belief, especially in spiritual circles, the idea that we're not our bodies.
He calls it the "you are not your body" belief.
Right. And he suggests that this belief actually comes from a deep fear of our physical nature, a disconnect that goes all the way back to, Adam and Eve feeling ashamed of being naked.
It's interesting to think about how cultural and historical stuff has shaped how we feel about our bodies.
Tolle argues that this separation from the body leads to a sense of being fragmented within ourselves. We try to transcend the physical, seeing it as separate from or even less than our spiritual side.
But Tolle's not about denying or rejecting the body. He's all about reconnecting with it. He actually sees the body as a portal to the divine, a source of wisdom.
He even gives a whole sermon on the body, this beautiful passage that reframes how we understand our physical form. He reminds us that what we see as, this dense physical structure isn't really real. It's just our mind playing tricks on us.
So how do we practically reconnect with our bodies like that? It's so easy to get stuck in our heads and lose touch with our physical sensations.
Tolle talks about feeling the inner body, that energy field that brings our physical form to life. He says that this inner body is the bridge between the unmanifested, that formless source of everything, and the physical world.
So it's about becoming aware of that aliveness inside of us, the energy flowing through us. Is that what he means by life energy?
Exactly. It's about tuning into those subtle sensations in your body, feeling that energy pulsing within. And he says that when we focus on this inner body, we can actually access a deep stillness and peace, a place of joy and intense aliveness.
Sounds like a really powerful practice for being present and connecting to our true nature. But can we really feel this inner body even while we're doing everyday things?
Oh, absolutely. Tolle says we can practice feeling that inner body while walking, talking, even working. It's about keeping that connection open, staying connected to that deeper part of ourselves throughout the day.
This reminds me of another topic Tolle explores, conscious death. What does he mean by that, and how does it relate to this power of the present moment?
He describes death as this kind of involuntary portal into the unmanifested, a realm beyond form and duality. He says this portal opens briefly when we physically die, and it's a final opportunity for spiritual realization.
He even talks about those near-death experiences people have described, where they see a bright light and feel totally peaceful and serene.
Yeah, exactly. Those accounts, while they're subjective, they give us a glimpse into what might be waiting for us after this life. Tolle says that if we work on our connection to the unmanifested while we're alive, we'll be more likely to recognize that portal when we die and move through it consciously.
So it's not about fearing death, but about preparing for it by getting closer to our true nature, to what's beyond form and time.
Right. What if preparing for death wasn't about fear and anxiety at all? What if it was about deepening our connection to the present moment? Imagine facing the end of life not with dread, but with curiosity and peace.
That's a huge shift in how we usually think about things, and it seems to tie back into that idea of surrender.
Absolutely. Tolle says that surrender isn't about giving up or just accepting a fate you don't like. It's about aligning yourself with life, accepting what is, and letting a higher power lead the way.
So instead of resisting or fighting against the current, we can choose to go with it.
Exactly. He even says surrender is the most important thing we can do to create positive change. It's recognizing that trying to control things with our ego usually just causes more resistance and suffering.
That makes a lot of sense. But letting go is hard, especially when we're going through tough times. How can we cultivate that surrender when it feels so wrong?
Well, Tolle suggests that what he calls limit situations, those moments when everything seems to fall apart, those can be incredibly powerful opportunities for awakening.
So you mean like when our usual ways of coping don't work anymore, we're forced to just accept the present moment?
He uses the example of people on death row. He says that in their final hours, they often experience such intense suffering that they have no choice but to completely surrender. And in that surrender, they find a profound sense of peace and even joy.
That's a pretty intense example, but it shows just how transformative it can be to let go of resistance even when things are truly awful.
Tolle reminds us that within every challenge, within every moment that feels like a breakdown, there's an opportunity for a breakthrough. It's about changing our perspective, recognizing that even in the middle of suffering, there's a space of awareness that's untouched by pain.
That space is our true nature. It's our connection to being.
And it's always there for us no matter what's happening. Tolle reminds us that we always have a choice.
We can choose to react without thinking, which just keeps the cycle of suffering going. Or we can choose to surrender, to access the power of now, and change our experience from within.
It's a radical invitation to live a life full of presence, awareness, and joy. And he doesn't just give us these ideas, he actually gives us practical advice on how to use them in our everyday lives.
I definitely want to hear more about that. What are some of the specific practices and insights Tolle gives us to help us cultivate this power of now? Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, like presence, surrender, even conscious death. These are all big ideas. But how do we actually put Tolle's teachings into practice, in real life?
Well, he really stresses being aware of our thought patterns, like
Yeah.
noticing when our ego is running the show, when we're feeling a sense of lack or comparing ourselves to others or being judgmental.
So paying attention to those negative thought loops that can really take over.
Exactly. And when you catch yourself getting caught up in those thoughts, just take a step back and observe them without judgment. Remember the sky and the clouds.
Right? Our true selves are the vast sky, and our thoughts are the passing clouds.
Exactly. Recognizing that we aren't our thoughts creates space for a different way of being. Tolle also talks a lot about the importance of practicing acceptance, not just of ourselves, but of other people and the present moment.
Acceptance seems so important for finding inner peace.
Mm.
But how do we accept things that are painful or hard? It feels like giving up almost.
It's important to remember that acceptance isn't the same as resignation. It's about acknowledging what is without resisting it. Because when we fight against what is, we actually create more suffering for ourselves.
That makes sense. But how can we accept things like loss, grief, or injustice? Those things are really painful.
Tolle acknowledges that pain is a part of life. It's something we all go through. He doesn't say we should deny or try to suppress our feelings. Instead, he encourages us to let ourselves feel those emotions fully, without judgment, and trust that eventually they'll pass.
So be present with the pain rather than trying to avoid it or numb it out.
Yeah, exactly. Allow yourself to experience the whole range of human emotions without getting lost in the story your mind creates about them. He also emphasizes that we need to take responsibility for our inner state, recognizing that we always have a choice in how we respond to things.
That reminds me of the idea of surrender we talked about earlier, letting go of the ego's need to control everything and trusting in something bigger, aligning ourselves with the flow of life, even when it's hard.
Beautifully put. It really speaks to the power of surrendering to the present moment, trusting that even when things are tough, there is a deeper wisdom at work.
So it sounds like Tolle's message is all about empowering us to take control of our inner experience, to find a deeper peace and fulfillment, regardless of what's happening externally.
Definitely. He challenges us to really question what we think it means to be happy and successful. He wants us to shift our focus from outer achievements to inner transformation.
The Power of Now is one of those books that can really change your life. It's full of such insightful ideas and practical guidance for anyone who's searching for a more meaningful way to live.
So who should read this book?
I think anyone who feels trapped by their thoughts, anyone searching for a deeper meaning and purpose, or anyone who just wants to experience more joy and peace, they could all benefit from reading The Power of Now. It can help you shift your perspective, reconnect with your true self, and tap into the power of the present moment.
If this deep dive resonated with you, I highly recommend picking up The Power of Now and seeing how it can change your life. It might just be the key to finding that true happiness you've been looking for.
And don't forget to subscribe and share this with a friend. Let us know what you think. We love hearing from you.
Thanks for listening.